Good evening, I'm Anna Kalczyńska and you're watching World News Tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw, Poland. The second massive attack on Kharkiv in 24 hours. The Russians do not even hide that these attacks on civilians are revenge for the destruction of their strategic bombers in a Ukrainian special operation. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Finland increases presence on border with Russia and plans to spend 5% of GDP on defense, criticizes Trump. Wagner Group withdraws from Mali, but Russia remains in the region. Prince William calls on world leaders to act together with urgency to protect the oceans. It's the second large strike on Ukraine following the Ukrainian Special Forces Operation Spiderweb, which targeted long-range strategic Russian bombers. According to US officials, Russian retaliation is imminent and likely to include different kinds of air capabilities like missiles and drones. Konrad Gorliński.
Over the weekend, fighting on Ukraine's front lines intensified, with Russia relentlessly pushing against Ukraine's eastern flank. A number of villages in Ukraine's Donetsk region are being evacuated, with Washington fearing that Vladimir Putin's threatened retaliation against Ukraine for last weekend's drone attack has begun and will likely continue with significant multi-pronged strikes. Just ahead of the second meeting between Ukraine and Russia in Istanbul last week, Ukraine scored a huge win in the SBU's long-planned operation codenamed Spiderweb. At least 10% of Russia's tactical bomber fleet was severely damaged in the attack.
What I think it's important to stress is that in the short term, we won't probably see much, consequences from a operational standpoint. We know that Russia still has a sufficient number of operational aircraft of the same type that it can use to strike Ukraine with cruise and ballistic missiles.
And that's exactly what Russia continues to do. Among other locations across Ukraine's eastern flank, its second largest city, Kharkiv, suffered the largest wave of attacks since the start of the war. The city and surrounding areas were targeted with drones, missiles, and guided bombs.
I think that Russia has already started to retaliate. They struck, civilian targets in the past few days, causing a lot of damages and a lot of victims in Ukraine, mostly civilian. So this is the typical Russian response. I don't think they will do anything strange or incredibly new.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, however, sees this retaliation as just another excuse for Russia to keep doing what it's always been doing.
And no matter what anyone says, these are not retaliatory Russian strikes, but destructive. The complete destruction of life. That's what they want.
I really believe that President Trump wants to achieve peace, but I think he uses absolutely wrong tactics to reach this. If he really wants to have peace, he needs to show strength. Putin understands only one language of strength, language of force. And that's exactly which Trump is not showing towards Russia.
Europe is heeding Ukraine's advice, trying to apply pressure both on Trump, most recently through a visit to Washington by the German Chancellor, and through calls for increased sanctions against Russia. Now, this is proving difficult after on Sunday, Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico had Parliament approve a resolution calling on the government not to back any new measures.
If there are sanctions that will harm Slovakia's national state interests, we will block them.
Meanwhile, Russia's accusing Ukraine of sabotaging the only tangible result reached in the second round of peace talks in Istanbul on Monday. There, both sides had agreed to a prisoner exchange as well as the repatriation of fallen soldiers.
Unfortunately, on the day before yesterday, the Ukrainian side had not confirmed receiving these bodies, and there are signals that the action will allegedly be postponed to next week. I confirm that we are waiting for an official notification via a channel known to the Ukrainian side that an action will be held to return the bodies. I repeat, we are ready to return more than 6,000 bodies in batches, by road and rail.
The Ukrainian side denies that they're delaying any such exchanges.
Russia has always organized provocation on a very sensitive issue, with the bodies of killed people. And today exchange was not scheduled. So Ukrainian side was not preparing and not confirming this exchange, which Russia tried to make.
However you look at it, it certainly seems that peace in Ukraine is as far away as ever. For TVP World, I'm Konrad Gorlinski.
So how to bring Russia to the negotiation table? As the daring sanctions bill initiative is pushed through the U.S. Senate by its authors, Senators Blumenthal and Graham, U.S. President Donald Trump appears to want to water it down. Unexpectedly, the hawkish Senate duo has heard support from a distant but respected ally, Finland, which aims to raise defense spending to 5% of its GDP and has criticized Trump administration's strategy on Russia. About it, Sonia Agata-Bishchan reports.
Happy to see you. My pleasure.
A step in the wrong direction. That's how the Finnish Prime Minister described the United States President Donald Trump's attempts to weaken the sanctions bill against Russia.
We need to force the Russian President Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table.
The development follows the U.S. Secretary of State's assertion that sanctions might have a counter effect on Russia.
Our belief, the president's belief, is he believes that right now if you start threatening sanctions, the Russians will stop talking.
The bill in question, supported by a number of U.S. senators, proposes imposing 500% tariffs on countries that keep buying Russian oil and raw materials. Petteri Orpo added that he hopes that the U.S. passes it as quickly as possible.
Finland's importance, geopolitical importance, is quite significant now. And the fact that Finnish President Alexander Stubb established quite close relations with President Trump is one of his most devoted European allies. And actually, Trump listens to a Finnish leader.
Having joined NATO in 2023 following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Finland's 1,300-kilometer-long border with Russia became the alliance's border with the Kremlin.
And Finland noticed that Russia has been building up 4 military bases, increasing military presence along the border with Finland, and it sends alarm bells in Finnish political circles.
In response, 2 bases for a new NATO formation, forward land forces, are being established in Finland. They're intended to be used for both conducting regular exercises, but also to provide deterrence. Against this backdrop, Finland is also gearing up to increase its defense spending, a move that comes in response to pressure from the U.S. administration.
So we're here to continue the work that President Trump started, which is a commitment to 5% defense spending across this alliance, which we think will happen.
Orpo asserted that Finland aims to raise military spending to 5% of GDP by 2032. He also confirmed the government's April decision to reach a 3% of GDP defense spending by 2029. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Agata-Bishchan.
The Russian private military company Wagner announced its withdrawal from Mali, ending more than 3 years of operations in West Africa. Although Wagner operatives say the mission is complete, Russian presence on the continent is far from over. The shift brings Russian support to a more fundamental level, according to the Kremlin. But what could that possibly mean? Natalia Komarov explains.
Russia's infamous mercenary group Wagner has declared their mission in Mali accomplished and announced withdrawal from the West African country. There is, however, a catch. Wagner will be replaced by another Russian paramilitary organization, the Africa Corps.
A key difference is accountability. You know, when Wagner committed atrocities, the Kremlin can put its hand up and say, well, that's just, that's the private military contractors. It's a private company, it's not Russia. They could always claim that. And it's not plausible, obviously, like I said, it's implausible. But when the Africa Corps commit an atrocity, that's official Russian foreign policy.
In a statement published on Telegram, Wagner Group says they eliminated thousands of terrorists and their commanders who terrorized the civilian population for years. In fact, the mercenaries who arrived in Mali in 2021 were mostly focused on protecting Russia-owned gold mines and aiding the military junta which assumed power in a coup d'etat. In 2023, Wagner founder Yevgeny Prigozhin led a rebellion against Vladimir Putin and died in a plane crash soon after. Later, most Wagner operations were moved under the umbrella of Africa Corps, an organization directly controlled by the Russian Ministry of Defense. But the neo-colonial model Prigozhin created across Africa lives on. The strategy is to offer military and material support to one side in a civil war, allowing it to win, and in return demand exclusive access to that country's natural resources, be it gold, diamonds or uranium. This has happened in Mali, but also in Burkina Faso, Niger, Sudan, Central African Republic, or perhaps most importantly, Libya.
Libya is one of the major sources of energy for Europe, and disrupting this oil and gas supply would impact Europe's energy supply, particularly since Europe has stopped buying energy from Russia.
Admittedly, it's not difficult for Russia to garner support in many African countries, especially those with violent history of French or British colonialism.
So eloquently put, I think there is a real deeper question about why African leaders love Russia. They're not choosing Russia because they love Putin. They're choosing Russia because Russia doesn't lecture them about human rights while selling them weapons to violate those same human rights.
It seems like once again people across Africa have become pawns in a fight between global superpowers. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
The City of Angels is under fire as 2,000 members of the California National Guard have been deployed to Los Angeles to intervene in protests over immigration sweeps. The White House activation of the National Guard marks a major escalation in the city after protests erupted over Custom and Immigration Authority raids, part of what the president has said would amount to the largest-scale deportation operation in the country's history. Will the move attain the protests, or will tensions escalate? Diana Skaya reports.
Molotov cocktails, burning cars and fireworks. These are just some of the ways furious protesters took their rage out on the United States government's latest crackdown on immigration. For 2 nights now, Los Angeles has been rocked by violent clashes and demonstrations following sweeping ICE raids. The buildup began on Friday night when a large protest erupted outside the Metropolitan Detention Center in LA and hasn't let up. Demonstrators could be seen clashing with officers, igniting fires, blocking streets, and rallying against a series of federal raids that so far has resulted in 44 arrests.
They employed the crowd control tactics like the tear gas, and it was too close to me, so I decided to get down and kick it away. And as soon as I kicked my second can, I got hit.
Federal agents used tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse crowds. Protesters wrapped in Mexican flags chanted around burning vehicles, unbothered by the presence of authorities.
It is a beautiful day of resistance because Trump, the administration, the Border Patrol, ICE, they know that they cannot go anywhere in this country where our people are and try to kidnap our workers, our people.
And accusing California's leaders of losing total control, U.S. President Donald Trump signed a memorandum to deploy 2,000 National Guard troops to the streets of Los Angeles on Saturday in what the White House said was an effort to quell lawlessness.
Great job by the National Guard in Los Angeles after 2 days of violence, clashes and unrest. We have an incompetent governor, Newsom, and Mayor Bass, who were as usual. Just look at how they handled the fires, and now they're very slow permitting disaster.
National Guard units were seen arriving in the City of Angels early Sunday morning. The Pentagon confirmed Marines could also be deployed if the situation gets worse. The city's response has been mixed. While LA County Sheriff's officials and the LAPD declared the protests unlawful, California Governor Gavin Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass condemned the federal response. Meanwhile, public opinion appears to be leaning toward the administration's approach. A CBS News YouGov poll released on Sunday shows 54% of Americans support the Trump administration's policy of deporting undocumented immigrants, while 46% oppose it. The poll also reveals a split on perceived safety. 42% of respondents believe deportations make the country safer, while 30% say they decrease public safety. Still, resistance across Los Angeles shows no sign of slowing, as more raids are expected and tensions keep rising. Diana Skaya for TVP World.
Only 3% of oceans are considered truly safe from exploitation, far short of a global target to place 30% under conservation by 2030. Emmanuel Macron, Prince William and Arnold Schwarzenegger have joined efforts to pressure world leaders on a global emergency in the ocean. Unfortunately, the summit in Nice, France, was short on support for a high seas treaty protecting marine life in the vast open waters. Ovidiusz Nicea has more.
Recent years have seen the degradation of marine ecosystems, plummeting fishing stocks, and mounting plastic pollution. According to the UN, up to 12 million metric tons of plastic enter the ocean every year. That's approximately a truckload every minute. The ocean is crying out for help.
We need to act now because we depend on it. Our planet depends on our oceans because it's an extraordinary carbon well, because it's a heat well. It captures much of the heat that we're emitting, because it's a treasure of biodiversity.
France, which is hosting the high-level United Nations Ocean Conference, is pushing for the ratification of the High Seas Treaty. It's a global agreement adopted by the UN in 2023, aiming to create marine protected areas in international waters. Currently, only about 3% of the global ocean is protected, despite a pledge to protect 30% by 2030.
What the conference will produce is actually a political declaration, which has been negotiated in the last 5 months at the UN, and which basically highlights a number of actions that member states, countries, but not only countries, it also applies to industry, to civil society, to philanthropic organizations to take action.
From June 9th to 13th, Nice on the French Riviera will gather world leaders and hundreds of leading voices on environmental protection. Prince William, heir to the British throne, has spoken with the legendary broadcaster and environmentalist Sir David Attenborough in preparation for the summit.
What we have done to the deep ocean floor is just unspeakably awful.
The truth is that healthy oceans are essential to all life on Earth. They generate half of the world's oxygen, regulate our climate, and provide food for more than 3 billion people. And today, they need our help.
Like most environmental issues, protecting the ocean requires international cooperation. And that's not easy nowadays.
So there are lots of countries that are turning their backs on multilateralism at the moment, across the board. The US is not going to show up to this UNOC, and they haven't been engaging in environmental fora across the board. However, it's really important that champion countries resist this and kind of stand firm on global cooperation.
The event in Nice is already the third UN Ocean Conference. Hundreds of protesters who gathered in the city before the conference hope this will be the first one to bring real improvements. For TVP World, Ovidiusz Nicea.
Apart from the tangible military aspect of the Russian war on aggression in Ukraine, there's also another war. Both sides aim to present the enemy as the main obstacle to peace, and the US, acting mediator, has a role to play in it too. We'll take a look at the latest developments in the information war with Elizabeth Brohl, Senior Fellow Atlantic Council. Good evening, madam, and thank you for joining us here on TVP World.
Good evening.
So let me start by the infamous prisoners of war exchange, or rather the dispute over it. How would you assess the current information war tactics used both by Ukraine and Russia, particularly as Russia accuses Ukraine of dirty games here?
Yeah, so ordinarily prisoner exchanges are used as a confidence building measure. So when countries, warring parties, feel that they have the potential to get to more substantial negotiations, they start by doing prisoner exchanges because that's something tangible. They can test each other's willingness to follow through on the commitments they've given. But what we're seeing now is a war of words, even on this relatively simple matter of this second prisoner exchange. And we should say that it's not as easy as it sounds to exchange prisoners. It's different kinds of prisoners. It's also some that may have died in captivity. So it is complex, but not as complex as negotiating peace, clearly. And so what we've seen in this round is the two sides having agreed on a set of steps that were going to form the second prisoner exchange. And then Russia saying that, Russia essentially starting this process on its own, and Ukraine saying, well, hang on, that's not what we agreed to, and Russia then saying, well, Ukraine is not interested in the prisoner exchange. So it is a very muddled picture at the moment, but I think, as has been the case throughout the war, Russia has definitely shown less commitment to the truth than has Ukraine.
Exactly. So this building trust measure absolutely failed so far. What are the potential consequences of these public disputes in your mind? And how might U.S. diplomacy depoliticize these standoffs?
Well, so one could say that the consequences of not being able to execute this prisoner exchange are dire, but then the situation is already dire for Ukraine. We are already in a land war in Europe launched by Russia. So it can't get much worse than a war, an invasion of a country in Europe or anywhere in the world. But I think there was some hope after the first prisoner exchange was successfully executed, that at least on this relatively small part of negotiations, there could be success. And we should remember every POW and other prisoner traded for somebody from the other side. That's a person who can then return to his family, or in a few cases her family. And it is extremely regrettable that we are not even able to reach that with the second stage of prisoner exchanges. Now, ordinarily, one would hope that the United States would be able to make a difference, and they would put pressure to get this deal done or to execute it. But that doesn't seem to be likely to happen. President Trump said just a few days ago, when in a meeting after, or in a press conference or press encounter during Friedrich Merz's visit, he said that he thinks the course to take is to let Russia and Ukraine fight it out. So that seems to suggest that the United States is not willing to play an active part.
Exactly, and it remains to be seen whether these implications will also influence future humanitarian cooperations. But let me now go to the latest phone calls between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and also the diplomatic effort on the part of Andriy Yermak, leading to a potential in-person meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump. Do you think, because apparently there's sort of a race to the US president's ear, but how important are these talks anyway, and how much can they change in the Trump's strategy?
Well, talks are always valuable. It's better to talk to whoever you want to influence than not to talk with them. But Vladimir Putin has shown over the past 3 years and now 3 months that he's not that willing to listen to any outside leader trying to sway him. And he had shown that, in fact, already before invading Ukraine. So it's better to have conversations with him than not to have conversations with him. But they are unlikely to yield the sort of significant steps that we need. And those steps are a commitment to serious ceasefire talks. Now, the talks that were held over prisoner exchanges, that's fine. It's good to talk about prisoner exchanges, but talks about ceasefire and some sort of peace deal, that has to be done by Putin himself. Putin negotiating with President Zelensky of Ukraine, with some sort of mediating power in the room, whether it be Norway, whether it be the Vatican, whether it be some sort of combination of countries, or the United States. But that's what needs to happen, and I don't think that will be the result of Trump's latest phone call with Putin.
And in light of the Ukraine's drone operation, the latest one, Spiderweb, how does this counter-information campaign shape global perception of Ukraine's military capability, and what could be Russia's response in info domain?
Ukraine has been incredibly good at in the information domain ever since the invasion, the full-scale invasion began over 3 years ago. Incredibly skilled. It clearly has some very talented people in the office that runs the various information campaigns, and they're clearly highly skilled in the English language, because the campaigns are not just in Ukrainian, not just in Russian, in addition to Ukrainian, but also in English, very successfully executed in English so that they can reach a worldwide audience, which is what they need to do. Now, Russia is not a slacker either in the information domain, but it's not as innovative as Ukraine. It's innovative in other areas, but not so much in the information domain. It doesn't put out as sophisticated content as Ukraine does. Now, it's very good at disinformation operations and influencing or subverting public opinion in other countries, but when it comes to influencing people to support Russia's side in this war, Russia has been not very successful. But what it is good at, or what it does have at its disposal, is a very significant military, and that's what it's going to use. It's what it's already using, and what it's going to use is likely to use to retaliate against Ukraine's very clever drone attack. Russia will never admit that it was a very clever attack, but it was a very clever attack, both from the harm that it caused and the way it was executed and the way it caught everybody's imagination and impressed people around the world. Russia is not going to let that go unavenged, and the Ukrainians knew it, but they went ahead with it, with the drone attack anyway, which I think was the right course of action. Look how much admiration or respect they have garnered around the world as a result of that campaign. But Russia is likely to use brute force in response.
Exactly, and this brutal force is well underway. Russia recently launched its largest drone and missile campaign yet, targeting cities like Kharkiv and Kherson, and tragically killing civilians, including children. So from an information warfare standpoint, how can Ukraine, and more broadly the Western partners, effectively counter Moscow's narrative justifying such attacks as military necessity?
I don't think anybody is under any illusion anymore that a large-scale kinetic response that kills civilians in response to a drone attack that disabled aircraft, that's somehow a proportionate or legitimate response. But I think that the challenge for Ukraine and the global community committed to the rule of law is that Russia doesn't care about its reputation. So it doesn't care that large parts of the world sees it as a brute aggressor. Now, we should remember that certain parts of the world do not, but large parts of the world do. And Russia just doesn't care. So it doesn't bother Vladimir Putin and his lieutenants that people in the West see Russia even more as a brute aggressor when it responds in this way, and when it launches attacks that are in no way a response. They are Russia initiating even more force against Ukraine, but Russia doesn't care, and this is our dilemma. Russia cannot be shamed into better behavior.
Elizabeth Bro, Senior Fellow, Atlantic Council, thank you so much for your for your insights, Madam, and for sharing your time and using your time here on TVP World with our viewers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. This was World News Tonight. Thank you for being with us, and please stay tuned to TVP World for more.